What's good, YouTube? Welcome to my channel, Large and Condition. Myron from Fresh and Fit thinks that sport proves women live lives on easy mode. Let's dive right into it. This is a major issue with the Redpill. It doesn't really help anybody, it just creates further divide between men and women. They are basically just as bad as the correct feminist that goes around and scream all four men or saying all men are bad and so on. Both sides are really bad for everybody. This obsession with who lives a harder life just doesn't help anyone. If you were to try and focus between you and one of your friends who have it harder, think about what that's going to do in your friendship. More than likely it will breed some sort of resentment towards your friend, which is just not a good thing. So focusing on who has it easier or harder will really just create some sort of divide between you. The same goes for us as human, society-wise. Mine very much focus on who lives an easier or harder life, men or women. And to an extent, in some areas as men, some areas as women, we all have advantages and disadvantages. However, Myron purely focuses on certain aspects and then uses that to say like, this is why men have a harder life. And he uses this and highlights it every chance he gets. And I understand very well the challenges that we as men faces on a daily basis, especially in the dating market. And our challenges goes very much unnoticed. And Myron likes to point this out, which is perfectly fine. What is not good is simply just focusing on that women lives easy and men have it hard. This black and white, there's no nuance in anything. The repeated differences. Whenever you hear someone talk about the difference between people over and over again, it's create a focus on the differences there are. And when you have this focus on what's difference between you and someone else, you can't just like let it go. You keep on focusing on it and what is it going to do at some point sooner or later. It will create some sort of resentment because you may feel like your life is much harder than someone else. So you may have resentment towards someone else because you feel like their life is easier. And the inverse could also be true. That other person that you actually think lives an easier life, they could actually feel like you're living an easier life because you're focusing on things that just don't really matter all that much, or you get hyper specific about something in your life versus someone else's life that is different and easier or harder for them. However, you do not look at a person's life in the overall picture, you look at it from a scenario to scenario basis. There's this sort of like hyper focus on who have it harder, which is really a childlike mentality. If you've worked in a kindergarten or if you have kids yourself, you can see other kids will go around and be upset that someone else has something that they don't and they hyper focus on it. It's a childlike mentality to focus on something that people have that you don't, and Myron do this all the time. Not just Myron, but Redpill content creators as a whole. In Myron's own podcast, he said that women's sport are easier than men's just because the requirements are less. Obviously, because it's a women's sport and biological differences makes it women do not have the same capabilities as men. So obviously the requirements is going to be less. I think this should be obvious to anyone with half a functioning brain. However, Myron seems to think because of these differences, it means that women live lives on easy mode because you don't have to perform as highly in a sport as men. But they're competing against other women. They aren't competing against other men. It's just like we have weight classes there for a reason. You're not going to have a 120-pound boxer versus a 250-pound boxer. It's just ludicrous. Men and women have one big difference in them when it comes to training. Men, we don't need time off aside from a deload here and there, but we can plan that in quite easily. Women, however, they need to account for the period every month. So think about this, you have 25% of the time throughout the year where you need to downregulate your training. Do you think it's easier or harder to constantly have to up and down your training rhythm and volume like this in order to get the results you're after if you're an athlete? Is that easier or harder to do? Especially if you're a coach, think about having to do these constant changes as a coach, and I can tell you from experience, it's not easy to do. You can think of it a different way. Let's say you were to make $40,000 a year, and then suddenly your boss comes in and say, hey, we're going to cut your pay by 25%, so now you're only going to make $30,000 a year versus the 40. Do you think it would be easier or harder to pay all your bills and maintain your life with 25% less income, or with maintaining the income that you actually had in the first place? The same principles apply here to training. It is easier to train and keep pushing your limits if you don't need to account for basic biology once a month. So you need to constantly back off in your training. Men don't need to do that. We can go for months without a break. Women cannot. The notion that women aren't as fast or strong as men, that then also proves that women's lives is an easy mode, just simply makes no sense. You could say the inverse and say because men are stronger and faster than women, that makes men's lives easier. Just because your physical capabilities are different than someone else's, that doesn't impact how difficult or how easy your life is. It's a complete nonsensical argument to try and be like, you can perform at this level versus someone down here, physically speaking, and then therefore your life is easy. Makes no sense. It is this constant wedge Redpill is drive between men and women, focusing on who lives easier or harder lives. And then there's the fact that they bring in the same type of people over and over. When it comes to women, 90% or more happens to be sex workers, and they do this to constantly affirm what they think and what the viewers think. This way they get to have basically the same conversation on repeat, so they don't actually even have to think, because they can just keep driving home the same points that they've had the last 200 podcasts. So it makes it very nice and easy for them. If you keep asking the same group of people, the same questions over and over, you will get more or less the same type of answers. If you ask police officers, are all people bad? Most police officers will say pretty much the same answer as the next one. And their answer will be more than likely yes, because what they get to see every single day is the bad people. So they get to be reaffirmed day after day after day that people are bad. Same if you ask a nurse, are people sick? Then yeah. Or people dying at the hospital? Then yes, because they get to see that every single day, day after day. They bring the same group of people over and over again because it helps keep drama and attention and chaos, which is nice if you want to grow your channel, especially in this type of manosphere. So it becomes nice and easy for them. It just doesn't help anybody because it creates resentment between men and women. The New Age feminism did the same thing, just towards men instead of towards women. Now the Redpillers are doing the same towards women and keeps driving this sort of wedge between both sides. And this is basically like a schoolyard mentality. You do something and expect someone else to react a certain way, but they don't. And then they do the same thing to you and they expect you to react in a different way that you do. Thank you for watching. Lars and Conditioning, signing out. See you next video. I hope you have an awesome day.